So we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Pullman Police Advisory Committee. Let's see, we'll go ahead and get these. Now that we've met quorum, thank you for coming, Richard, and getting us out of this sticky situation. Did you guys get a chance to look over the minutes, or are there any comments on the minutes? No, hearing none. Do I hear a motion to approve as is?
Motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. I did look through them pretty thoroughly and they're good, so. And they're a little short because last time we had our super cool tour of the police department where we got to see the chief's old handwriting on some of the old notebooks in there. So.
Well, I'm sorry, that was the exciting part of the tour.
Actually, the coffee mugs was pretty, seeing the coffee mug collection is pretty exciting, and then, you know, getting to put my husband into the jail cell is pretty exciting.
That's always
It's like,
good.
you're finally where you belong. Go in there. Offer. All right, so we have a special guest with us. Sergeant Opgenorth is going to give us a presentation today, and we're going to just be nice and let him sit exactly where he is to give us this presentation today on Pullman PD field training program and going over some specifics on some of the devices you guys use. Is that correct, Chief? Or am I off
Just
track?
His face makes me think
Just
yes.
the field training program.
Okay, we're just going to do the field training program part today. Okay. All right, so I think we're good to get started then.
Okay. So yeah, I'll talk about the field training program. It's a big topic. I'll probably be able to cover it pretty fast though, but if you have any questions, I might miss things because there's so much that I can talk about. Basically, when we hire a new employee, a lot of times they have zero experience. Like when I was hired, I hadn't done anything in police work before. So when we get people into the police department, we're starting from nothing and training them to be on their own. So that starts with sending them to the police academy, which is 720 hours long, over in Burien or in Spokane. And they teach them everything they pretty much need to know, the very basics. But it's just like going to class, you learn how to do stuff in theory, but not necessarily in practice that much. So when they finally get out of the academy, then they're assigned to the field training program. And we have several field training officers, and when they come out, I will schedule our new recruit with 3 different field training officers because it's broken down into a 14-week program, and it's divided into 4 phases. The first phase, or each of the first 3 phases, I should say, are 4 weeks long, and then the 4th phase is what we call a shadow phase. And we're not really training them at that point. We're just watching them and seeing how they do and if they're ready to be on their own. So our whole program is based off of what's called the San Jose model, because San Jose Police Department years ago came up with this model, and we roughly follow that model where we have it broken down into several phases. Each phase is a different field training officer, and the trainee is evaluated every single day. And so they get constant feedback, and we have what we call an FTO book that from day one they're given this big, huge book just full of every task you can imagine that a police officer might need to know. And during those first 12 weeks, the goal is that we're going to be able to train them on every one of those topics. And the recruit or the trainee signs off when they feel comfortable with that topic, and the field training officer signs off when they feel that that topic has been covered. So we go through this 12-week long. Each phase progressively gets, I don't know if you would say harder, but more. They're required to do more on their own. So right off the bat, when they get out of the academy, they're kind of scared. They don't want to be all of a sudden thrown out there. We have an FTO that's taking them along and showing them everything. So from the first day, it might be as simple as you're learning geography, you know your way around the city. And that takes sometimes a couple weeks just to figure out every street in the city. And taking them on calls that are pretty routine for an experienced officer, like a noise complaint. The first time we take somebody brand new on a noise complaint, they don't even know what to do. They're kind of scared and they have to talk to people, and it's a big experience for them. But by the time we're done, the field training officer doesn't have to do anything. The recruit has handled noise complaints and they can go handle it perfectly fine. And so we kind of do it's kind of like a tell, show, do kind of a thing, where at first the field training officer is telling the recruit, this is how you do your job, and this is how you do this particular piece of your job. And then they'll show them how to do it, and then after that, it's like, okay, I told you about it, I showed you how to do it, now you do it. And so we try to do that as much as we can. Now, obviously, we can't do that on every type of call, but using a noise complaint, we get those so often, that's an easy example. It's like, oh, the first time I'll show you how to do it, or I'll tell you how to do it, then I'll show you how to do it, and then I'm going to expect you to do it. So that's basically how they progress, or what the first 12 weeks are like, is just every day coming to work and taking the calls and trying to sign off on everything in your FTO book. It's really stressful for the recruits, as I am assuming you can imagine. If you walk into briefing and from that moment until you call out of service, every single thing you do is being judged and written down. And at the end of your day, you're presented a piece of paper. We call it a DOR. It's a daily observation report showing you everything you did right and everything you did wrong. And then you have to sign it. And so every single day, and we keep track of these, so they get routed to me, I'll review them, and then I'll send them to the patrol commander, and then we keep them on file. So we can kind of see trends if they're having problems with something, and if we need to intervene or pull them out and give them extra training in a certain topic. But it's very stressful getting graded every single day like that. But we try to do everything we can to relieve that stress, because we understand you learn better when you're not stressed out. So we try not to add any artificial stress in there, but we're also trying to be very open and honest with everything we do, so the recruits aren't left guessing what's expected of them. We give them everything they need to know before they start the process and what's expected. And after every phase, we have a meeting. So if the first 4 weeks with the first FTO, when that's done, before we hand them off or her off to another FTO, we'll have a meeting with all of the field training officers. I will be there, and the patrol commander, and sometimes the chief shows up, and we will just talk about how this person has been doing for those first 4 weeks, good and bad, and then we ask for input. And we kind of do that because in years past, recruits have said, well, I didn't know what you're talking about, and it scared me thinking you're talking about me. It's like, okay, well, you're coming to the meeting. You're going to hear everything we say, and we're going to talk about good things and bad things and what we expect. And then from there, we decide, are they ready to move on to the next phase? And if they do, they move on to the next phase, and they do the 4 weeks again. After 4 weeks, we have another meeting, decide if they're ready for phase 3. If so, they move into phase 3. At the end of phase 3 is one of our bigger meetings, more important meetings, because now we're trying to decide, are they trained and are they ready to go? Because at that point, if we agree that they're ready for phase 4, we call that the shadow phase, because we're not doing anything. But we still have an FTO there to help them if something bad happens. So we will simply observe for the next 2 weeks, and then we'll have another meeting where we'll come together, and then we talk about the recruit's 14 weeks, and most importantly, if that recruit is ready to be on their own. And so we'll have a big discussion, because that's the most important meeting we have, because we're going to let them go, we're going to assign them to a shift and let them do their own thing. Up until that point, they've had a field training officer with them, And we have, all the field training officers are highly trained, they're very experienced, and not only are they responsible for training this officer how to be an officer in Pullman and what our expectations are, but they're also kind of a safety net. I mean, the number one thing we do as field training officers is we want to make sure that everybody's safe. So we're not going to let them do anything that might hurt themselves or me or anybody else. And second, we want to make sure that they don't make any mistakes that's going to cause a lot of liability issues. And you know, when they're brand new and you're right there, things like that happen all the time, where you might grab them by the collar and pull them back and say, oh, don't do that. You can't do that. But that's what's great about having the FTO, is you're right there with them the whole time. And typically by that 14th week, they usually are ready to go on their own, and we really don't have any worries about them. And we assign them to a shift and put them out there, and at that point it's really just the patrol sergeant's responsibility that they're assigned to, and we all look out for each other anyway and help each other out when somebody's new. But that is, I think, the gist of the program. I did mention it's the San Jose model, and we use standardized guidelines for evaluating, and that comes with the model. So what that does is it makes it so that we are rating the person's performance, not their personality, I guess I should say. It takes that out of it. So we have if there's 3 different FTOs and they're all rating this recruit's performance based on the standard performance guidelines, they should be able to give them the same rating. Not like, well, I don't like that person, so I'm going to rate them bad or something like that. They should be all be able to give them the same rating. And that's something that all the recruits have. They could look at it and see, I brought it with me, they could look at it and see what's acceptable and what's not. And for the most part, it's so fair that I don't see that really any recruits ever disagree with their rating. Because they could look at it and say, oh yeah, I did do that. I deserve that number. And we rate them on a scale of 1 to 7. And the 4 is acceptable, 1 is completely unacceptable, and 7 is perfect. And really what we're looking for more than anything else is that they're consistently getting 4s and higher. When they start getting 3s, that means you didn't do something right. If I start seeing these come to my desk and they're really low numbers, then it's kind of a red flag, and we might have a meeting early and try to figure out how we can help that person. And I think that's pretty much the gist of it, and I might have missed a lot of things, so if you have any questions.
I have a lot of questions.
How about what it takes to be trained as an FTO?
How long it takes for an FTO?
Like what does someone have to do to be an FTO?
I think the FTO Academy is a 1-week course just to get the actual training, the 1-week Field Training Officer Academy. But I mean, typically every single person in our department is usually trained as a field training officer, but that doesn't mean we necessarily have those people working as field training officers. And it's, in my opinion, personality has a lot to do with it. To me, it's like being a teacher, and just because you're a good cop doesn't mean you're a good teacher. And so I think that we do a pretty good job of finding the officers that they really know what they're doing, but they're also a good teacher, and that's what we have right now.
How about extending on phases?
Sometimes we'll extend the phases. Like I said, it's a 14-week program, but at the discretion of the patrol commander, we can extend a person. So if we get to that 12th week and somebody is struggling in a certain area that we as trainers think that maybe we can fix, then the commander can extend that training for a couple weeks, saying, okay, work on this area because that person's not quite ready to be on their own, but we can train that person if you give us 2 more weeks. Sometimes if you don't make FTO, that's it. If somebody can't make it through this training program, then we have to let them go. But if it gets to the point where they're near the end of their training and they're not quite there, and we do this. If somebody's really close, we're not going to fire them. If we think that we can salvage them and just correct or modify this one thing they're doing wrong, we do our best to do that.
So is this like a regionally specific model that we use? You said the training program was in Seattle or Spokane, or?
Well, the academies, the state training academies,
Yeah.
there's the main one is in Burien.
Okay.
And so that's where the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission, the academy is, and they hold the Basic Law Enforcement Academy. I think there's a class that starts every month, depending on funding
Okay.
and how much they need. Spokane sometimes has 1 or 2 academies per year up at their academy.
Mm-hmm.
They just have a training facility up there, and they'll hold an academy class up there.
But that's still, it's a state-run academy.
So it's recognized
It's all the
across the
same,
state,
it's
yeah.
the same curriculum.
Okay. And then you mentioned in the standardized testing that no personality, like you somehow account for getting the personality, not accounted for, but from my experience, just knowing officers' personality is really important on how the public perceives them and that component of the public interaction. How do you ensure that people have the right personality to work with people at the same time as the test not accounting for the personality part?
Well, it's kind of interesting when you see new people come through because everybody interacts so differently. Mm-hmm. And I guess sometimes I'll see a way an officer is doing something and I wouldn't do it that way, or I don't think it's that good. But if it accomplishes the goal and the public is happy, it doesn't matter if I like it or not, or if I agree with it. It
matters if he likes it.
Well, it's pretty obvious if you're talking to somebody and you're just not doing it well, you're either gonna get complaints or worse. Some people can talk somebody right into handcuffs when they arrest them, and other people's can't, and then they have to go hands-on, and
Isn't there a communication element on the DOR?
Yeah, there's a whole communication element. It's hard. That's one of those ones where it can be harder to grade. But there's one section here about relationships, and there's 3 sections for it that we grade them on. It's relationships with the public, just in general. And then there's relationship with ethnic and minority groups. And then there's a section, relationship with department members. And so we grade them every day on that. It's pretty hard not to find something to grade them on all 3 of those unless they never leave the station. So we'll grade them on that, and if you want to hear examples of the standard guidelines for those, like, I'll just read the one for relationship with the public. So to get a 1, which is completely unacceptable, you're abrupt, belligerent, overbearing, arrogant, uncommunicative, overlooks or avoids service aspects of the job, introverted, insensitive, and uncaring, poor nonverbal skills. So this sometimes can be hard to grade, because I can just say, yeah, I think they're rude or something. What we try to do is document exactly what they did or said in quotes. So anybody looking at that can say, oh yeah, that person's rude. I can see why you gave him a 1. So you have to be very just detailed when you're documenting these things, especially when you are giving them 1s, and maybe down the road it's like, look, you don't have a good relationship with the public. We're not going to keep you around. You're not a good Pullman police officer.
Right.
They'll look back over those 12 weeks and how many times did we document what you said that we don't like.
Right.
What is
And
a 7?
A 7 in this, superior, is very much at ease with citizen and suspect contacts, quickly establishes rapport and leaves people with the feeling that the officer was interested in serving them, is objective in all contexts, excellent nonverbal skills.
Some of those do seem like personality qualities to me, especially when I believe one of the lower ones it said something about being introverted in a sense. So it seems like there would be a little bit of personality, because you can say the same thing and be robotic and stern and aggressive and in the same quotes and have a hard message and have a good message if you say it nicely and calmly and clearly, you know. So it's one of those gray areas, but it's nice to know that that's in there.
And that is one of the harder things to train.
Yeah.
We do our best to train everything we can, but that's kind of one of those hard things, at least for me, to train people. I can try to give them examples, and now it's great with our body cameras because we can play it back to them and show them, see the way you talk to this person and what you said and how you said it, and look at your body language, and then try to give them an example of saying the same thing using better.
So you use those body-worn cameras in the training? Oh.
So I think when he said, take the personality out of it, what he meant was the scoring of that trainee gonna take the personality of between the two of them out of the equation. So there's gonna be very much an objective scoring of that person, almost just using the rubric and not, because you're gonna be stuck in a car together, you're gonna have a lot of conversations, and you don't wanna get to the point where, well, I don't like you very much, so I'm gonna score you down, or I really like you, so I'm gonna score you up. I think when he said, correct me if I'm wrong here, trying to take the personality out of scoring, I don't think he meant the recruits, the trainees' personality, but the
More of
relationship between the two of them.
You know, before they came up with some of these models years and years ago, they talked about it being a popularity contest. And so the new person that was in training, you know, they didn't even necessarily train them, they just threw them a car and let them sink or swim. And the people that made it were the people that everybody liked, like in the department. And the people that didn't are those people that I guess the other officers didn't like.
Does it happen very often that these recruits come and they're here for their 12 to 14 weeks, that they just plain don't make it and they're out the door at the end of the 14 weeks? Does that happen often?
Well, I think we're doing better now. And personally, I've always taken it as we are field training officers. This is our job to teach people how to be police officers. And if we can't do that, the first person that I look at is ourselves as training officers. If we can't teach somebody, did we fail? What did we do wrong? And so I think with that attitude, and we've been doing better. I think in years past, and this is quite a while ago, I don't think we were very good about doing that. I feel like some of our FTOs were more, I'm gonna just try and be tough and scary and like it was a macho thing or something, I don't know. But we have the attitude now of we really want to train these people and we want to take the pressure off of them. And, you know, we've gone to the trainings, we try to do and research and I guess just better ourselves as trainers and learning how do you train adults, what's the best way. We try to figure out what the learning style is of that particular person because everybody everybody learns different. So we try to find what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are and play to those strengths so we can make them successful. So right now, I don't know what our rate is. For a while there, it seemed like about 25% of the people didn't make it through our training program. I think we have a better percentage now. It might be more like 10%.
And another part that plays into this as well is the recruitment and selection process. So we're very intentional about the type, not just people that we think, you know, are smart or that can do the job, but people that relate well with other people and just the types of qualities that we think will be successful and the type of qualities that we want being a Pullman police officer. And so we work really hard at not trying to get someone through the whole selection process that's set up to fail in the training program either. So I think that also speaks to maybe also our increased amount of officers that are passing the program.
And having sat through, and I don't know where it was in the process, this was May of 16, interviews. You guys had me in on the interviews because Dan Hornfeld couldn't do it. I mean, I felt as if all the questions were really targeting trying to find somebody with great people skills. And I kind of felt like you guys were saying, all the other elements of the job, we can teach you, we can train you all that aspects of it, but what we can't train you are those how to relate to people, how to talk to people. So I felt as if that was kind of the first step in the process of identifying the type of person that you want to be as your officers, who can relate well to people. All the other elements, I felt like you guys were saying, we can train. Obviously, there's got to be a core interest in wanting to be part of community policing. But I felt as if what you were really after in those questions was, do you have the people, do you like people, do you have people skills? Can you de-escalate situations? And that was probably the first step of many, many steps before they got to the point where before you even sent them off to the academy.
And I think I'm glad you said that, because I totally agree. We do look for the people persons, and not only that, but common sense.
Well, in this regard,
Well, it's true. I mean, I don't feel like you can really train common sense very well, but I can teach you all the skills you need. But if you can talk to people and you have good common sense, we can take care of the rest.
well, in this regard, the nature and nurture question, which is most important? Are people born with good skills and then you can train them, or can you train somebody with nature was minus some of these things?
I think it depends on what skills you're talking about.
By the way, I've been pulled over more than I'd like the chief to know, a number of times around Pullman. I've always been treated very courteously and so on.
I've trained a
So
lot
you're
of
doing something
officers.
right.
I've trained a lot of officers.
Or
and
letting me go.
I've trained some officers that I felt like they really struggled communicating with people. And you wouldn't know that now if you talk to those officers, because they can. And I don't know if that's had anything to do with our training or just being immersed into it and having to learn how to communicate and talk to people, or if we just got lucky. I don't know. But it definitely helps. And that's one of those areas that it's hard to train. I mean, and that too with just ethics.
Did you say about 10% of people drop out, or?
That's my guess. I think we've dropped it from 25% of the people that don't make it to about 10%. And it seems like when I see those 10% that don't make it, sometimes I honestly feel like they're not making it, and maybe they've already decided that they don't want to be a police officer. It's not for them. And I think honestly some people don't want to say that because they've put so much time and effort and everybody's looking at them and their family's looking at them. So I think sometimes when we let them go, it's almost a relief to them because that's what they wanted anyway.
Well, I would point out that that's actually pretty rigorous. There's on tenure track faculty at WSU, the people that don't make tenure is less than 5%.
Well, I think we're getting better people now, but we take it very seriously in the field training program because if the FTOs, I mean, they're very honest about it and they don't want people working here that can't do the job. And same with me, and the chief supports us. So if we get somebody that we just can't train or just doesn't work out, we don't want to just drag them along and say, yeah, you can do it. It's good enough, because we have higher expectations for our department. And so we stick to it.
I was going to ask how you guys deal with laterals or people who have been trained in other states. Do they have to go through like program of shadowing still when they come into our police department, having such a different background, or?
Well, they are still required to go through the same training for field training officers. They have to be certified first in Washington. So when they come from out of state, sometimes they have an equivalency academy that's shortened. And you did this, right?
I did.
So you could probably speak about the academy
And they've
aspect.
changed it. When I went through it, it was like a couple of months of online work. And then it was like 3 or 4 days at the academy, essentially just going over some, like the Washington State Constitution and very important arrest concepts in Washington, how they differ from other states. And then there was a test that we have to pass that's more comprehensive. And so anyone coming from the Washington state recognizes certification from certain states. And so if you come from one of those states, you just have to do the equivalency academy. But if you come from a state that they don't recognize, then you have to go through the full academy.
Okay.
And then when they get out of the academy, they go into the field training program just like anybody else. But the chief has the discretion to shorten that time. So if we get somebody that we're training and they know the job, there's no point in extending it out in 14 weeks if we can do it in 6, for example. A lot of times, especially if they come from just somewhere else in the state, there's nothing new to learn as far as criminal procedure or criminal law. So all they really need to do is learn a little bit about how we do things here at Pullman PD, like how to write a report and how that process works and flows. And then other than that, it's geography. So they know how to get around. So we can get them in and out pretty quick.
Can you go through a little bit of the details of how you guys are trained to deal with stressful situations that, I know you're talking about, maybe you notice and they're not so good at certain areas, but it seems like certain areas may be harder to test, especially like stressful situations. If someone's saying, okay, you're on the road and you're pulling over someone that you know is armed and that you know has this background, like how the officers are trained to deal with
Well,
that stuff.
I mean, that is obviously a little bit harder to train because we don't have that luckily in Pullman all the time, thankfully. So it's not like we're pulling over, these really dangerous people and having these scary encounters like that. So we do our best. I mean, a lot of it is you can talk with the recruit and visualize it and say, what would you do if, and always kind of think about what would you do if you pull this car over and all of a sudden the guy gets out with a gun. Kind of think about it and visualize, like they talk about in playing sports, visualize getting that touchdown or making that 3-point shot in basketball. Try to visualize it. But then we also will set up like mock scenes where we'll have officers or interns role playing, and so we can get them to practice that way. And otherwise, we do our best, or I do my best, to schedule our recruits to be working in the busiest times in Pullman. So if we have a home football game, we'll probably have our new recruit up there. And that's just an experience anyway. I mean, walking into a packed bar where you have to go and talk to the bouncer on the other side of the dance floor and how you're going to get through. And but we also have, I mean, the academy puts on a lot of training like that. They'll do critical incident training where they have to, and they have mock scenes that they have to pass before they can even get out of the academy. So they get a little taste of it there, and then we try to give a little more to them here. And it really depends. If we are training somebody during the summer months when there's just not a lot of stuff going on, we'll try and make up stuff for them to practice on. But we'll keep track of their FTO book and see what they're getting. And if they're just, sometimes we'll get a recruit and it's like, oh my gosh, they've been on more big calls than some of our 5-year officers because they've gone on everything, and so then they don't need it. So we just try to adjust as we go.
Any other questions? One more question I had is how typically do you ever have situations where people have trouble responding to the constructive feedback? If you are rating them low in some categories, like what is your typical response?
Our typical response is after they get out of the field training program, they tell us how much they hated it. But honestly, it's like they take it and it seems like everything's okay. And then they'll tell us later how they couldn't sleep because they got that low score. And that's when it's like, wow, this is really tough on them. As much as we try not to be tough, but we have to grade them. And so we try to make it transparent. And at the same time, you don't want to say it's okay, because it's not. They got a 1 or a bad score, so you need to kind of let it sit in. So it's hard balancing act. Everybody typically takes it just fine when they get it. It's just when they're finally done and then all the pressure's off, and I don't know, maybe they feel like they can tell us what they really think, and they do.
And if there's someone that just cannot accept critical, constructive criticism, then they're not going to pass the program either.
The most I've seen are people that just want to talk about it, like maybe they don't agree with that number, and then we'll talk about it more. And the FTOs, or I'm not always right, and maybe I'll say, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Or the other thing too is when we have 28 areas that we rate them in, if they screw up one thing really bad, like say a traffic stop, they do a traffic stop and they do that traffic stop horrible. I'm not going to go through here and ding them for that one traffic stop on 5 different areas. I'll pick the one thing that they did worse on that traffic stop, and that's where I'm going to give them their low rating. I'm not going to pile it on.
How is this training program funded? Is it just funded through the police department or just?
Right, it's all, the field training officers are working their own assigned shift.
Okay.
And really, it's just the new officer that comes out of the academy. We don't count them really as a body as far as patrol and providing staffing. They're just viewed as a trainee. And so, from the time that we hire someone until they get out of the FTO program is Academy's, what was that, 4 months, maybe 5?
4.5, yeah.
Yeah, plus 14 weeks. So they're really no use to us, honestly, as a counting as a staff person in patrol until they get out on their own. So we're, of course, paying their salary and benefits during that whole time, but that's all just part of the process. So yeah, it's just all funded internally.
Okay.
So you've invested 7 months in these people before you can actually put them on the board as one of your patrol officers. So because of that, you really can't afford to get it wrong.
Right. Well, there's 2 sides of that coin. The one is, yes, and Jake made very, very good points that we take it very seriously and we work as hard as we can to make someone succeed. But and he also mentioned we don't want to pass someone that we just don't think is going to be a good Pullman officer. So investment or not, it's just not worth it to us or the community to have someone that is not going to be a good officer.
But those costs, you budget for that. You budget
Right,
for a training
yeah,
budget.
yeah.
Because when you send someone to the academy, it's not like that's funded by the state, right?
So the academy does pay for 75% of the training. We pay 25% of that. And then, of course, we pay their salary and benefits and some travel and some meals during that time as well. But when it's in Burien, they live at the academy.
And is there still something in Sheldon? Is that WSP that's in
That's,
Sheldon?
yeah, troopers. Yeah.
They go down there for 1 week to learn driving and traffic accidents.
Any other questions? Thank you, Sergeant. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Good information.
You want to leave any of this?
Does anybody want to look at any of these rating forms? We can pass one around if you guys want to look at it.
Pass one. Yeah. I'm also going to pass around the Lentil Festival sign-up sheet.
This top sheet is what they get every single day. And then the second sheet is just extra comments, and then the third is just write it out, what they did good and bad. And then this last set is what we use to figure out the scores that they get.
Okay. Thank you. And then I'm also gonna pass around, we're just updating our contact list, so just write your name, address, email, everything on here, just so we make sure that we have your updated contact information. I'll pass that over here first, but- Alright, so, we are now gonna talk about the Lentil Festival a little bit. Have we got the child ID kits? And we do need 2 people at a station to run that. And I believe we have 1 person signed up so far. I will be there the full day on Friday, and it turns out I cannot be there on Saturday, but I will be there the full day on Friday.
About half of Saturday.
Yeah.
And Charlene passes along her regrets that she's had some issues come up that she cannot participate,
Yeah.
and she feels very bad about that, but she couldn't help.
Yeah, she will be out today, obviously, and for the Lentil Festival, and hopefully she'll heal and recover fast and be back before our next meeting.
And I don't, have you and Darby talked about having someone come and help you guys set up on Friday?
She said, well, I mean, at the last meeting, we had discussed an officer coming down and showing us how to run the child ID setup and what we should be doing with that.
What time are you gonna be setting up on Friday?
So typically, we get down there around 1:30. Last year was about the time people were setting up.
Okay.
And that's like a half an hour before it starts. I can be there earlier, I can be there at 1.
Well, I'll double check to see if,
No, does it?
starts when?
When does it start?
At 2 o'clock on Friday, right?
I'm not positive the start date on Friday. I thought it was later than
I thought it
that.
was like 5 or 4.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's what I
did
was
she mix
thinking.
up, like, what is it, what are the
Yeah,
times say?
2 o'clock Friday is the start time.
Yeah.
And it's like 11 to 5 on Saturday, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, the parade starts at 11 on Saturday. But everything should be set up by then.
Maybe Darby accounted for setup at 2 o'clock.
Wouldn't surprise me, but.
That's what I'm thinking.
Darby?
Because I don't think it starts any earlier than 4 on Friday.
Thank you.
But I'll check to see if Scott Patrick, who's gonna be at the booth on Saturday, if he's available Friday afternoon, and that way he can come down and help you guys set up and go over the child ID kits with you.
Okay, perfect. Well, yeah, she has us down at starting at 2, so I will plan to be there at 2. Doesn't say online.
Doesn't say.
It just says it's the 18th and 19th.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Huh.
So we'll just, I'll plan to be down there at 2 o'clock. You know, maybe call Darby and verify that later. So on Friday, I will be there the full day. We'll try and get, I'm thinking that since we're short on people, I did ask the chief earlier if I could have my husband come down and stand with us and represent. He's been here enough times to know how we do things. He's now working down in Lewiston, so he hasn't been able to come see us regularly lately, but he misses us, and I'm sure he'll be happy to come help at the Lentil Festival. So I will make sure that he signs up as well. Forced sign up.
Voluntold.
Yeah. And then other than that, we just need just a quick walkthrough on how we're gonna set that child ID thing up on that day.
Okay.
I can also come down to the station if people need help loading up the board and everything as well. Darby did have on her list that she would be getting new police advisory cards printed for us. And last year we gave out like suckers and stickers, so we wanted to make sure that we had suckers and stickers for the kids. But, I think Darby said we had that stuff still, but I'm not.
Okay.
Are there any questions about that event? So most of you are gonna be out of town, right?
So I have an interesting predicament, and that's that I'm actually going to be part of the parade and also have my
Oh.
own booth.
Oh, cool.
As part of my campaign, but I'm gonna check in with my schedule and see if I can
Yeah.
pop by. I just took pictures of the schedule, so we'll
Yeah.
see if there's any opening slots I can.
Yeah, certainly. No problem at all. So you're gonna be there on Friday and Saturday then?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Well, there were, we'll send this around via email one more time to see if we can get any other signups, and other than that, we can.
I'm gonna speak out, play devil's advocate here. The last time I went to Lentil Festival was 2 years ago. It rained. There were no, it got dark. There were no chairs to sit on. I spent two hours. I'm pushing 80 years. I had to walk home in the dark, and I fell down, and hell's gonna freeze over before I ever go to another Lentil Festival. If you guys wanna go, that's fine, but I'm out of it.
That is okay. We totally get that, so.
Okay.
Corey, will the booth remain set up like overnight on Friday? Because I have the first shift on Saturday, so will everything?
So, let's see, this first shift on Saturday is 11 to noon, so I'm guessing the festival doesn't start till noon to 1, if I'm understanding this right. The booth will not, everything's gonna be taken down, like the
Okay.
board, the handout materials. I do believe they leave up the tents overnight typically. Chief, do you know the answer to that?
Yeah, there'd be no need to break everything down.
Yeah. They leave up the tents and the table, they just take the materials and
Okay.
the board.
Take it away or just put in boxes underneath it?
We put the boxes underneath the tables
Okay.
of any kind of like handouts, but I'm not sure if they
Yeah,
left
we
the
could leave
board.
everything there if there's
Yeah.
not a weather issue.
Cause there's somebody down there.
Well, I think those shifts there'll be an officer there also, so shouldn't be too lost.
Yeah, on Saturday, there will be an officer at all the time slots, is, right? Is that correct? Okay. Yeah, so then we're pretty much gonna be good on
Perfect.
Saturday anyway. Okay. Any other questions? It's a fun time. You guys are missing out. The chili is so good. I just don't get why people aren't down there just for the chili.
I don't like chili.
It's really good, lentil chili. It's unique. It's got like they put chocolate in it and some sort of cinnamon spice.
Chocolate?
Yeah, they
Oh.
do. Mexican chocolate, I believe, unless I'm making things up. I'm pretty sure they put chocolate in the lentils in the. I've made it before. So, okay, well then, why don't we move on to the police department update? So, Chief Jenkins, can you go forward with that?
Sure. So on July 13th, two other officers, Scott Kirk and Scott Patrick, as well as a Washington State trooper, and I participated in the summer reading program at Neal Public Library, and we do that every year. And they have a time for us to read a children's book to the children at the library, and so we posted some pictures of that on our Facebook page. July 18th, we held our annual liquor and cannabis license holder training. We had 61 attendees, so they were either owners or employees or managers of mostly liquor and some cannabis stores in town. Yeah, that an investigator from Liquor and Cannabis Board and one of our sergeants put on the training for them. July 21st, we had code enforcement officer interviews. Corey was on that panel. It was an internal process, so we had 4 internal candidates. That means internal means anyone who was a city employee. And we are having chief interviews this week. July 22nd, we had a police SUV and our code enforcement truck participate in a Touch a Truck event at Pullman Christian School. So I guess it was quite the happening there. It was pretty popular, and a lot of pictures posted on a lot of different Facebook pages for that. July 25th through the 27th, we held a police management team building workshop. The last one we had was 3 years ago, and we had the same facilitator come back, and we had really all the same participants. And so what they did different this time is they came early and they spent a couple of days interviewing our employees, our staff members, to get a sense of, things that were going on at the department, what they liked, what they didn't like, morale, and they really used that information to help put together our agenda for our workshop. And so the things that we talked about and came out with some agreements were staffing at the police department and the need for more staffing as we move in the future, succession planning with some retirements coming up, better communication within the department, and accountability within the department. The consultant put together a statement regarding what they found from the interviews as far as job satisfaction. And essentially there's a rating scale that goes different categories of poor, below average, average, above average, high, and very high. And our scoring was right at the top of the high, almost into the very high range. So it was some really good feedback for us to get. July 27th, we had 50 middle school age students from Okinawa visit the city, and they always, when they come, they do a tour of the police station and the fire station. So we hosted them for a while. On July 29th was the second annual Community Safety Fair that was held at the Brailsford WSU Visitor Center. And so we had an officer at that event. On August 9th, we held a regular meeting of the Town Gown Collaborative between the city and Washington State University. August 10th, we had crowd control training. Every year we do some form of crowd or riot control training that involves Whitman County Sheriff's, Pullman Police Department, and Washington State University Police. Every other year we'll do essentially just a refresher and tabletop type of training, and then on the other years we'll do a full-scale exercise of training. So this year was a full-scale exercise, and they did the training over at Martin Stadium. And so that was August 10th. August 11th, I've talked about this before, we were planning training on what we call the Rescue Task Force, where the new best practice to help people who are injured during an active shooter situation is to get emergency medic personnel to victims as soon as possible. And so our active shooter and firearms instructors were trained in that, and then we brought Pullman Fire on board, and then we provided the training to Pullman Fire Department personnel. So now, we're in if we have a situation like that, we now have everyone trained that we can get medics to persons who need medical attention right away. And the best practices are always evolving, and this has evolved just because of some previous shootings that have happened elsewhere where people have died just because they didn't get medical attention quick enough, because the current practice had been to make sure that the area was completely clear before they brought medics in or brought people out. And so, as I mentioned, those are always evolving, and now we're at a point where we can get that help to them more quickly. The fire department is looking for grants to get some ballistic vests and ballistic helmets for their personnel, so they have some level of protection when they go into those, what we would call a hot zone. August 12th, this past Saturday, was our first annual Aerial Adventure Day at Krugel Park, and one of the reasons for the event was to unveil our drones that we purchased that we're putting into operation, and also to provide education to the public on recreational drone use and what the laws and rules are about that. And so we developed a brochure that we handed out, and in fact I put it with our Lentil Festival materials, and so we can take those to the Lentil Festival as well and hand those out. And so we did some demonstrations with our drone. There was a a drone racing club from Spokane that came down and set up a drone racing course and did some drone racing there. And so we had a lot of people stop by, a lot of kids stop by to see it all. We purchased some little small toy drones and let kids fly those. So it was a very good event. The Daily News covered it this morning in their paper, and then KLEW, it should be on their evening news tonight. Coming up, I was invited, along with our new College Hill officer, Alex Gordon, to attend a meeting with the National Panhellenic Council and United Greek Council. That's on August 16th. And the United Greek Council is a multicultural Greek presence. August 21st, we're invited to meet again annually with the Pullman School District, with their administrators and principals, just to touch base again and make sure we're all on the same page with emergency responses and communications with between the police department, fire department, and the school district. August 23rd, the officer that is in the academy right now, Riley Harkins, will be graduating from the police academy, and then she'll come back and begin the field training process. August 23rd through 29th, I was invited to accompany the Washington State University president and vice president, and as well as Jack Thompson, who was a previous football player with WSU and played in the NFL, to go on what's being labeled as a goodwill trip to American Samoa. And so WSU wants to start improving their relationships with potential international students and communities. And so this will, I don't know if I'm going to be going on any other trips, but for them, this will be the first of many trips, I think, for them. On August 26th, we have planned an emergency disaster exercise at the Pullman Moscow Regional Airport. We had a meeting today to talk about some final planning. There's some possibility that it may not happen on that date because of some logistics issues, but tentatively it's still scheduled for August 26th. And then the week of September 5th, all of the department heads have scheduled budget meetings with the city supervisor and mayor to present our proposed 2018 budgets. And so through September, we'll be finalizing the budgets that we'll be presenting to city council. Constituency follow-up, I believe it was Richard reported a parking sign that was placed near the blue shed at the city playfields. So I forwarded that to Parks Department, and I don't know if you've noticed if that's been taken care of or not, but it was passed along.
Thank you.
And that's all I have.
Perfect, thank you. Any questions? I'm always the first person to ask a question. You said that you and Alex, officer, you guys are going to be going to the Greek Council event or something similar?
Right, it's the Panhellenic Council is made up of the presidents of the Greek community at WSU, as well as the United Greek Council, which are the multicultural Greek presidents. And so we go to a monthly meeting where we meet with student leaders of multicultural student groups, but they're not necessarily fraternities or sororities, where this is specifically fraternity and sorority leaders that we'll be meeting with. And this is the first time since I've been here that we've been invited to this meeting, so I think it'd be really beneficial and for us to make those connections, particularly for Alex Gordon, who's going to be working on College Hill this year, to make those connections and start working with them.
Yeah, it'd be great to have follow-up on how that one goes.
Sure.
I know on our list, we wanted to invite somebody here to talk about the fraternity, sorority interactions with the police department, and maybe Alex, as he gets going in that direction or after this meeting, can give a report on how that
Sure. Or we could get the person that's coordinating this meeting is He's the assistant director of whoever oversees all the fraternities and sororities, maybe.
Okay, yeah, they changed the title many times, so I know.
So, I mean, he sounds like he might be a good person to come and talk to about that too.
Yeah, if you
want.
could ask and
Sure.
start that contact with that would be great.
Yep.
We'd like to definitely hear from them. Any other questions from, yeah?
Yeah, I have a question. In terms of upcoming events, have you guys been notified of a march that's supposed to be happening on Saturday? And if so, are the police planning on attending? And I guess that's the only follow-up, because if not, then there's nothing.
I haven't heard anything about
Okay.
a march. Is it supposed to be strictly on campus?
I don't know that that's accurate. I think the plan was to go from Beasley to Subway downtown, or at least that area. That could have changed since I last knew, but that was last night, that I think it was supposed to be both on and off campus.
What's the march for?
Related to the stuff in Charlottesville and our lovely
Related to
student. The weekend stuff in Charlottesville, and one of our students being involved in that.
Do you know who's organizing that?
I don't know the name off the top of my head, but I could email you or Darby like the Facebook event link.
Okay, that'd be
if that
great.
would- Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are those typically things that need a permit?
It depends how they do it.
Magnitude of it.
I would say typically no, not, because a lot of times they will just stay on the sidewalk and that type of thing. If the only time they really would is if they were gonna shut down the street. And I know last time there was a march from campus to downtown to the same area that we worked with them, and Shane was actually out with them.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Yeah, on the march to help them out, so. Good, well, thank you for letting me
Yeah.
know, and if you could send me that.
Could I raise something here as a retired WSU professor, 42 years teaching Civil War history and history of the South? I've been watching this stuff at Charlottesville, and I'm very concerned. When you look at the election map from 1916, or 2016, we're the one Democratic county in all of eastern Washington. We're a university community. Not many years ago, we had Richard Butler right up the road from us, and we've had the WSU Young Republicans president resign tonight because he was at Charlottesville. What the hell he was doing there, I have no idea. I think we need to be very aware of this stuff, and I hope you are. I assume you are. But that was frightening to watch that stuff on TV.
Yeah, last year when there were some things going on across the nation, I think one of the connections that we made that has come in that's been very beneficial is the multicultural student group leader group, and we've developed a relationship with them and some mutual trust, and as a result, I think the events that they put on, we work with them to try to make them as safe as possible, and but allow them to have their event, to be not coming at it from a position of trying to shut anything down at all. It's allowing people to exercise their right of expression, and I've been really impressed with the responsibility of the student leadership, and I think some of that happens just because we do sit and talk about these things, and we listen to them, and they listen to us. So I'm very optimistic about how events will happen here, just because of those types of relationships.
Well, it was very disheartening to see this in Charlottesville, Thomas Jefferson's hometown. It was an absolute disgrace.
I agree with that.
Well, before we go on to our constituencies poll, I just wanted to mention that the website, it says that our next meeting is still in May. So I think I got an email, and I was sort of like, oh, when's your next meeting? And I was like, oh, I went to our website and it said it was in May. So I want to make sure that we're getting our website updated on with the correct date and time of our Police Advisory meetings. It's just a little bullet point at the bottom, and I'm sure not very many people even notice that because we do other announcements, but it's also in the community update. If you guys ever look at that calendar, these meetings should always be in the right spot. And then, yeah, we can go ahead and start with Richard and go around with our constituencies.
Nothing except they had the Welcome Back WSU Evergreen newspaper the other day, and the chief had a long interview, which I thought was very helpful, talking about all the issues students could get into and how you would deal with this and what the penalties were and so on. I thought that was great to get that stuff all out in front. That was a good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think the only thing from Military Hill is we are all ready for the construction to be over. But other than that, I haven't heard anything.
I'm ready too.
Can we get through Stadium Way Extension and
No.
Grand right now?
No, it took me half an hour to get here from Turner, so no. That was supposed to be the benefit of the students coming back, is they have to get the construction done before then, but that did
Now
not
they
happen
started
this
in
year.
Moscow.
Yeah.
Now Moscow's
Yeah.
just,
But other than that,
Gary will tell you he's not responsible for public works.
You gotta go talk to Kevin Gardis. I'll give you his contact.
Somebody ought to be impeached over this.
Justin Brackey, Military Hill, nothing to report.
Matt Sutherland, College Hill. I'm sure I'll start getting a lot more,
I'm sure you will.
but nothing for now.
Okay.
Eric Tetzloff, business, nothing to report.
Oh, Cora Woodley, business. Nothing to report for the business, but my business is located on the Sunnyside Hill where Center Street is at. And I thought at one meeting, and this may have been like 8 meetings ago, so pardon me for bringing it back up now, but we were talking about a light being installed down at Center Street. Is that still in the works?
It is. I think the timing, though, might be actually next summer,
Oh, okay.
but it's been approved and it's going to happen. It's just a question of when.
Okay.
Is there any discussion of a light at Professional Mall Boulevard and Bishop?
oh yeah, that one's terrible too.
I haven't heard that there is.
Probably not.
I just about got in a wreck there the other day, which was my fault.
Then you would have seen another officer again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did you say the light might be? Or what did you say first on Stadium Way or Bishop and what?
and Professional Mall Boulevard. It's,
Oh, yeah, okay. And where's the light possibly gonna be on
Grand-
Center?
Well, it'll be at Grandin Center.
Oh, Grandin Center, oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, Phyllis Stalcott, Sunnyside Hill, and I have nothing to report except, what's your business again?
I own a handmade jewelry business.
Okay.
And I run it out of my house, but
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it's been open now for 5 years, 6 years now.
Sweet.
You know, I'll add one thing about College Hill is, and I may have talked about this last time, I don't remember, so I'll mention it again just in case. Part of from the Town Gown Collaborative and the College Hill Subcommittee, part of what we're going to try to do at the beginning of this academic year is to focus in the College Hill core area on trash issues. That's been one issue that's been brought up a lot of times from groups in that area as something they want to see tackled, and so we've asked our code enforcement officers to concentrate on violations there, provide public education and warnings up through about September 11th, and then after that start issuing tickets. So just FYI, they're working with ASWSU and landlord tenants to get information out to the tenants in those areas, which is essentially from south of Stadium and east of Grand and north of downtown. So just FYI.
By the way, did you say, is Darby doing the City Pullman Facebook stuff?
Well, Darby shares that duty with another city employee, so there's being items that are posted there by someone else while Darby's gone.
I was just gonna say, I'm glad for the construction updates, and usually,
Oh, right.
Pullman Police shares it too, so.
Right. Yeah, in fact, what I did is, since whoever was doing it for the city posted it, I shared that on the police department.
Okay.
So that was an easy way for me to do it.
Yeah, yeah, so. Yeah.
Any public comment? Nope. Hearing none. Our next meeting's on September 11th on Monday. And I think,
Could I just say quickly one thing more about Charlottesville? When Jefferson died, he wanted to be remembered for two things, and they're on his grave markers. Author of the Virginia Declaration of Religious Freedom, which disfranchised the Anglican Church. You could be a member of any church in Virginia then. Primary author of the Declaration of Independence and founder of the University of Virginia. He didn't mention his presidency, which happened to double the size of the United States, but okay. So it's really sad that that happened there. It's happened that it happened anywhere.
so, motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?